Transmission start. Welcome to Where Did the Road Go? Join us as we wander off the path and explore lost history, consciousness, the paranormal, unexplained mysteries, alternative thought, and much more. We are present on the web at wheredidtheroadgo.com. Now here is your host, Soraya.
All right, welcome to this episode of Where Did the Road Go? Tonight I'm talking with Timothy Renner, author of Beyond the Seventh Gate, a short but excellent little book about some stuff you've probably never heard of. At least I know I've never heard of most of this stuff. There's a few in there that I was somewhat familiar with, but overall it's legends, folklore, and weird encounters from South Central Pennsylvania. So not something you hear tons about. I did do a Patreon extra segment with him. So patrons will be getting that later this week. If you want to become a Patreon, go to wheredidtheroadgo.com and you can sign up for as little as $3 a month. It helps us out and I get you some extra stuff whenever I can. All right, without any further ado, this is Timothy Renner here on Where Did the Road Go? All right, I'm here with Timothy Renner, and you have published a book called Beyond the Seventh Gate, Exploring Toad Road, the Seven Gates of Hell, and Other Strangeness in York, Lancaster, and Adams counties. And you've self-published this, correct?
Yes.
All right, when did this come out?
August of 2016.
Okay. It's a very interesting book because I don't think I haven't heard about most of the stuff in this book. Even the Seven Gates of Hell that you lead off with is stuff I've never come across, maybe because I'm not from that, the area, which is central southern Pennsylvania, correct?
Yes, it is.
And so let's talk a little bit of how you start here. One of the things that you talk about is you actually had written an article that got used in Weird USA, but they kind of took it out of context?
Well, I had written an article about the Hex Hollow story, which is it's the famous hex murder that happened in York County in 1928, which was, at the time they called it the trial of the century. It was very big news. It made newspapers across the country. And I had written an article for that, and they asked to publish that, which I said okay. That they read it in another magazine, another publication. And they highly edited that they edited way down, which is fine. I mean, that's to be expected. But they asked me to take photographs for that article and the one on Toad Road and the Seven Gates of Hell, which are supposed to be located there. And I knew there was a lot of nonsense going around about that, so I said, yeah, I'll take the pictures, but please let me kind of read over and edit the article, fact-check it for you, because there's a whole lot of nonsense out there about insane asylums and things like this. And they published my photos, along with this outrageous story about a burning insane asylum, and that was very frustrating for me. And I sort of, when I saw it published, somewhere in the back of my mind, I think I said, well, I'm going to have to get the real story someday.
Yeah, and the first part of the book is you kind of debunking all these myths around Toad Road and this insane asylum that never existed, did it?
No, there's never been an insane asylum anywhere in York County, Pennsylvania. In the first part of the 1900s and before, the people with mental issues would have been sent to the almshouse in York City, and then about I think in the 1950s, York Hospital was built, and they ever since then that's where they have a wing dedicated to mental health there. So
now,
that's where it would have been.
Now, on the other hand, there are people who say that Toad Road never existed, but you were able to find this on old maps.
Yes. Yeah, my father-in-law does genealogy and has maps dating back to the 1700s, I think, and it was on there. It was marked. That's how I was able to find it originally. I can't find that map now, or I would have printed it in the book, but I know it was on there. And in fact, I talked to a witness recently after the book was published, and he too remembers it specifically being Toad Road. He said, no, that was not called anything else. That was Toad Road back there.
Okay, and now it's almost completely overgrown.
Yeah, it was closed after Hurricane Agnes, which was 1972, I believe. Yeah, 1972. It washed out. It runs right beside a major creek called the Cadorus Creek, and it was washed out, and the township just never opened it again. They just shut it down.
So how do you think these legends have formed over the years? Do you think it's just people who like telling good stories, or was there anything you were able to find that corroborated any of this stuff, that like the Seven Gates and the insane asylum or anything like that?
So the legend that you'll find on Wikipedia and even on the Hellam Township website talks about an insane asylum that was located on Toad Road that burnt down, and the patients escaped in the fire. Some of them died in the fire. Some of them escaped in the woods, and they were summarily dispatched by locals who were fearful or for whatever reason killed them as they were running through the woods. And the seven gates were then erected supposedly to keep people away from the ruins of this insane asylum. Originally, I thought it was a complete fiction. I was on it was an email list back in the late 1990s that was dedicated to like legend hunters and ghosts and things like this. And some people, certain group of people, they would kind of go out every weekend and they come back, and often with crazy stories. And I found myself sort of debunking them a lot on the list. And one time they came back with this crazy insane asylum story, and I thought it was a complete fiction. I thought they made it up. But as I did my research for the book, I did find there was a place in Hellam Township. It wasn't on Toad Road at all. It was off of the main road through the township, which is Route 30, and it was called a sanatorium, but you have to realize that any place of medical rest in the early 1900s was called a sanitarium or a sanatorium. Doesn't necessarily mean they were mental hospitals. This happened to be an old folks home, and it was located, and it did burn down in the 1940s. So I think probably some people remembered that there was a place that was called a sanatorium that burnt down somewhere around there. There was another fire of an old there was a flint mill on the far northern end of Toad Road at one time, and that office burnt down in 1987 or 88, I believe. And they probably maybe remembered there was a fire there, and these things got sort of misremembered, I think, and exaggerated, until it became this ever more outrageous story.
And I'm sure that made you really popular on the email list.
Yeah, I when I would I remember just going right to the maps and saying, nope, nothing ever back there. The only thing that was ever back along Toad Road was what they called a seasonal dwelling, which was smaller than a house. It was probably a little hunting cabin, and only one. The road is pretty remote, and so they changed it. They would change their stories. Well, it wasn't an insane asylum. It was this mad doctor, which was very unfortunate because there was a doctor who lived near to Toad Road, and he got bound up in the story. Dr. Bellnap, he was not a mad doctor, as they report. He just happened to live there, and I think, again, it was, we found a doctor that lives near there. He must be the mad doctor. He was a pretty righteous guy from all my research. He fought in both world wars. He did a lot of free charity medical care for the poor and aged, and taught at Johns Hopkins and UPenn, I believe. So this is not the kind of guy that's going to be, keeping, patients in his basement or whatever it was.
Right.
It's very unfortunate that he got tied up, and I was pretty happy to be able to. I hope I cleared his name a good bit in my book, because there's other ghost story books that name him. I know his second wife is still alive. I don't know if she knows any of these stories have gone around about her husband. I didn't want to bother her with it if she didn't know.
Right.
Because he passed in around 1980, I think 1979 or 1980, and like I said, hopefully I've cleared his name and he won't be associated with this in the future.
Now the phrase "the Seven Gates of Hell," first of all, sounds like a name of a metal album.
Sure.
And It seems, as you go through the book, you relate it to a few different areas that supposedly contain these 7 gates to hell, and Toad Road being one of them, you say only really has 1 gate on it.
Yes. Yeah, there's one sort of galvanized farm gate at the end of it just to keep people out of there. And more no trespassing signs than you're likely to find, anywhere else. It's just plastered everywhere over it. I should say that I had permission to go back there. If anyone's listening, don't go back there. It's private property. People don't want you back there. You're not going to see, when I talk about cryptids and so forth, the chances of you seeing something back there are very slim, and you're going to get in trouble if you go back there and possibly even injured. So stay out.
So, so the belief, and you talk about in the book about how people will say, well, there's not actual gates, there's fallen trees and things like this. That they it seems like people are trying really hard to fit this idea into this location.
Yeah, and I think even the witnesses. Now, I will say that the witnesses report a lot of really weird stuff back there. The funny thing is, though, there's very little of it can be ascribed to ghosts or specifically ghosts of insane asylum victims. They'll report things like screams from the woods or something stalking them through the woods, things like that. So there is odd stuff that goes on back there, but it's just there's just very little proof of this insane asylum story. That said, when people go there, if you go there and you hear a scream, and all you've heard is this story about a burning insane asylum, I think it's sort of natural for you to assume, oh, that's one of the ghosts screaming. That's what I'm hearing. It's the ghost. So a lot of people, I think, are experiencing things that they're chalking up to ghosts that may not necessarily be that.
Right. And you did get an interesting picture that you put on the back of the book that it's really hard to tell what you're looking at, but it definitely looks like some kind of red-eyed, dog-faced monster.
Yeah, it's odd. I didn't notice that. I didn't know I was taking that. When I took the picture, I was just... When I hiked the entirety of Toad Road for the book, I'd been back there previously and since, but I wanted to make sure to sort of walk and document everything I could for the book. All the places I talk about, I think... I'm trying to think if there's any I didn't visit that I talk about. I'm pretty sure I visited every place in the book that I talk about. But I specifically wanted to go to Toad Road and hike it the whole way through. And I took dozens and dozens of pictures while I was there. And as I was looking through that, I just noticed this odd-looking thing. And that's the only thing I got that was strange at all. I don't know what it is. I don't know if it's pareidolia. It's just odd. It's an odd picture.
And have you had the opportunity maybe to go back and try to recreate the picture, see what you got a picture of? If it was something like a weirdly shaped stump or something?
I have, and I mean, it didn't come out the same. Whatever was there is not there still. So
Now
I'll have to go back. I went back, I should say, at night. So I have to go back during the day and try to, get the same lighting conditions.
The picture on the back, is that colorized at all, or is that essentially what the photo looks like?
No, that's what it was. It's a little blurry because it was blown up so much, so you can see it.
Because the pictures in the book are obviously not in color, but the back picture is.
Right. Yeah.
So
yeah, that's why I wanted to put it on, so people could get a good look at that. So I made sure to print it, big and in color on the back.
And it is really a weird picture. It looks like some kind of dog-faced creature with teeth and a huge snout and red glowing eyes.
Yeah, I've had people call it a demon dog or a dog man, or somebody said, well, that's a bear. And well, if it is, that's pretty amazing because we're not, it's a bear standing up in York County. We do get bear here, but not that much. It's not a common thing.
Yeah, and like with any picture, unfortunately, it's not really proof of anything, but it's definitely a creepy-looking photo for sure.
Yeah, yeah.
Now, the 7 gates of hell? I mean, what was the point of it? Was it supposed to create bad things happening to people, or just create weird experiences? What would be the point of anyone walking through these 7 gates?
Well, when I first moved here, which would be in the mid-1990s, the 7 Gates of Hell weren't even associated with Toad Road. Everyone who told me the ghost stories and so forth said they were either at Hex Hollow or a place called Prospect Hill Cemetery in New York City, which is just a big kind of Victorian-era cemetery. And the way they were supposed to work was there were no physical gates in either tale. It had to do with, you would take a certain route, either through the hollow, which does have a lot of winding roads and stuff, or through the cemetery. And these sort of symbolic gates would open up with each circuit you made of this route. And things would supposedly get, spookier and more horrible with each consecutive circuit. With the 7th, I guess, we supposedly no one came back from the 7th.
And which makes you wonder why anyone would do it. If they
Right.
if they believed it, or if it's just one of those I dare you to do this and see what happens type of thing.
Yeah, I think it was very much a sort of a, kind of local kids, daring each other or something to do on Halloween night or so forth. I've had people tell me, the previous to and after the book, that they know the route, whatever the particular route is through Hex Hollow and so forth. And so, I mean, it's still there, I guess, but I think Hex Hollow is a weird place. There was supernatural stuff going on there before the murder ever took place. They had ghost reports and so forth in the old newspapers, strange lights and stuff.
And the fact that it's called Hex Hollow as well kind of gives it that eerie sort of thing. Do you know why it's called that?
Well, that's the nickname it got after the so-called murder. The murder that happened there was, there's a local tradition called powwowing. It's sort of a faith healing thing, but it gets associated with witchcraft, and because it deals with finding witches and breaking curses. It's a local folk tradition, but a lot, I guess, because the same people that can find witches and break curses often themselves get called witches. This fellow thought he had a hex put on him by a man named Nelson Raymeyer, and he ended up he and 2 other guys ended up murdering him. And it because it was associated with this tradition, this powwowing tradition, or sometimes they'll call it hexing sometimes. It kind of got the nickname Hex Hollow. The proper name is Raymeyer's Hollow. It's named after Nelson Raymeyer, the man who was murdered.
Ah, okay. There's a story you tell in here about a white man sitting on the gate to Toad Road.
Yeah.
And that's a creepy and unique story in itself.
Yeah, that was a fellow I talked to. He was a friend. When I was writing this book, I asked everybody I knew, like, do you have any stories about Toad Road? Do you have any stories, local stories, ghost stories, see anything weird, et cetera, et cetera. Well, this fella is he's the husband of a woman my wife works with, and we were at dinner one night, and I just sort of asked him. He said, "Oh, I grew up in Helm, and yeah, I've got something." And he told me the story about driving out there and seeing this man all in white. So he was very pale and white hair that was spiked up. So it was very, very eerie, and they just drove out to the area just to get because it was an area of legend, and they wanted to get spooked. They were high school kids just driving out for a thrill, I guess. So they came around the corner and they saw this guy sitting on. At the time, there was no gate. It was a cable that they had stretched across the road, keeping people out between two, like a steel cable.
Right.
Yeah, between 2 posts. And he was sitting on that, and they said he didn't react at all. Didn't look at the car, didn't react to the headlights, just kind of sat there staring straight ahead, and really, really freaked him out. It was all in white, just very pale white hair, they said, and white suit, everything. So that was one of the stranger accounts, which I thought I really liked that. It had nothing to do with an insane asylum. It just a very odd thing.
Yeah. I've never heard of anything like that before.
Yeah, I mean, I'm part of the thing that I found in this book is where I find ghost stories and cryptids, I find mystery lights and UFOs.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know why, but they're kind of all coming in the same areas. So there's just a lot of strange stuff reported out on Toad Road.
The Hidebehind. Tell us a little bit about the Hidebehind, because this has some interesting implications too.
Sure. Yeah. Well, as I was gathering my witness reports and so forth, what I was finding, as I said before, is a lot of that stuff wasn't matching up with an insane asylum in any way. I didn't expect it to, but I did expect people to maybe say, "Oh, I saw, an insane asylum victim running through the woods," or something like this, which I would have to question. But that's not what they were finding. They were telling me about screams. That's the most common things. Screams heard in the woods there. But people were talking about being stalked, having things walk beside them in the brush, just out of sight. Things peeking out them from behind trees. And these are all sort of cryptid kind of things. They're this kind of Bigfoot behavior, if you know anything about Bigfoot. So I started looking into that and thinking, well, let me see if I can find anything to do with, that'll back that information up. Well, my wife went to camp at right out by Toad Road. It was across the creek. There's a road that parallels it called Jerusalem School Road, and she went to day camp there. And this was in the 1980s. The only thing they told her, she remembers, it was either a counselor or another camper there, pointing across and saying, "See that over there? That's Toad Road. Don't look behind you on Toad Road." And that stuck in my head, because that's the first story I ever heard about Toad Road before any insane asylums or gates or anything like that. And it's just a very eerie phrase, "Don't look behind you."
Yeah.
I'm digging through different Pennsylvania folklore just to see if I can find anything, relative to the book in general, not necessarily specifically to Toad Road. And I came upon the story of this creature called the Hidebehind, which Native Americans told, and I'm sure they had their own name for it, and I'm sure that's a translation. But when the Europeans got to these shores, they kind of warned them about two things. They said, "You'll see lights in the woods. Don't follow the lights, because they're going to lead you to your doom." And they said, "Beware of this creature called the Hidebehind, which stalks behind people." And they said only the bravest should be the last in line, because only the bravest could be relied on to never look behind them as they go through the forest. So that, to me, again, this thing would peek behind trees and grab the last in line. It's kind of more Bigfoot behavior again, and it sort of reinforced what the witnesses were telling me. But it also brought to mind David Paulides' work.
Yes.
Because the last in line is getting taken in so many of the cases he's researched.
Absolutely, yeah. And I don't know that I think people tend to blame this stuff on Bigfoot because we don't know what else to kind of associate with it.
Right. And I don't know that the Hidebehind was specifically a Bigfoot. Maybe the Hidebehind was a name for a phenomenon, and not a specific creature. They never described it. The Native Americans, they said never, anyone who ever saw it was never seen again. But just taking that in, along with what the witnesses said and the other things I was finding, I just thought, well, now I'm going to look for missing people in the area. And I did find, in the 1920s, a hunter was found dead after he discharged a shotgun 2 times. They don't know what he was firing at or anything, but he was found dead back there. In 2014, a woman went missing, a 61-year-old woman went missing without a trace. Now, she was near the area. She wasn't specifically on Toad Road, but she was right in that same area. She was dropped off to walk alone in the area, and she's never been heard from again. And sometime in the last few years, I think in the last 4 years or so, a hunter was found dead. He was assumed to have fallen out of his tree stand, but it was a strange, and that was right back in the area too. Just another strange case.
Well, I know Pennsylvania in general has a very high number of strange disappearances to it as well.
Yeah, I think Paulides said that considers the whole state one of his
clusters.
Yeah, one of the clusters. Yeah. So, but and these are just 3 that I found specifically in the area. It's really, really hard to find found people. In other words, people that were lost and then were found. It's not terribly, for all the spookiness associated with it, it's not terribly deep woods back there. I can't imagine anyone getting lost for terribly long. But there were reports in old newspapers of people being lost in the area. I couldn't find any follow-ups or anything. I assumed they were found.
Well, I would think also when you go back in time, the woods were probably a little thicker than they are now.
Sure, yeah.
I mean, unless something's happening where people are getting disoriented,
Right.
Let's talk a little bit about these earth lights and these lights that the Indians, the Native Americans had warned people about when they came over. I always immediately start thinking of the Marfa lights down in Texas. Are you familiar?
Yeah, a little bit.
And I mean, their characteristics are if you go after them, they will take off and lead you on. But if you stop, they'll come towards you. Almost as if they're displaying some rudimentary form of consciousness or possibly reacting to magnetic fields of people in some way. I don't know.
Right.
But when you hear the will-o-wisp tales, the tales of these different lights leading people astray, if they're always going to move away when you move toward them in sort of in a random way, that is exactly what would happen to people.
Yes. Yeah, and those are exactly what the warnings were, that you're either going to get led to your doom or they'll turn around and follow you. That was one of my good friends. She said her grandfather told her, always talked about the will-o-wisps in the woods, and he said, don't follow them, because whenever you're done following them, they're going to turn around and follow you.
And yeah, it sounds exactly like the Marfa Lights phenomenon. And I think that's probably the easiest thing for people to actually experience these type of lights because they show up on a fairly regular basis there.
Yeah, and I mean, like I said, I just have them every in the book, with the exception possibly being of Prospect Hill Cemetery, because that's right in the middle of York City. There's not a lot going on there. But Hex Hollow, Chickies Rock, which I talk about, which is kind of across the river as the crow flies from Toad Road. Toad Road, I get these mystery lights are in all of these places. People talk about the orbs. I guess a lot of people call them orbs nowadays because of the popularity of the ghost thing. But what they're describing is the same as the will-o-wisp.
Yeah, well, it's one of those things where people, if they're up in the sky, they're UFOs. If they're in the house, they're a ghost. If they're in the woods, they're whatever the person wants to associate with them. That's what they are.
Right.
When in reality, they're really just these orbs of light.
Yes. Yeah. And we're not sure what they are.
Yeah. They seem to behave like plasma, from what I can tell.
Yeah, I mean, I'm at this point, I'm convinced they have something to do with the cryptid mysteries as well, just because they're always seen in the same place. But I'm basing that only on that fact, not on any deep knowledge. I've never seen one turn into a cryptid or vice versa. I just think they have something relative to them.
Yeah, well, it could be, maybe people instead of orbs or lights see a cryptid instead. I mean, maybe that's what their brain places on the whatever these things are, or maybe these balls are like a symptom of whatever happens when cryptids, UFOs, and things like that appear, like some kind of energy in the area.
I could see that.
Because it's not just this, this area of southern Pennsylvania that you see that. You have all these areas, these so-called portal areas where all this weird phenomena just kind of manifest.
Oh, absolutely. And I mean, I've gotten to the point where I'm almost ready to bet money on where you find Bigfoot sightings. You'll find mystery lights of some sort.
Mm-hmm. And probably UFOs and other weird creatures here and there.
Yeah, yeah.
You have a particular type of Bigfoot in that area called the Albatwitches.
Yes, yeah. It's Albatwitch is how I've been pronouncing it. I've heard Albatwitch. I've heard any number of variations.
Yours sounds better.
It's a German term. Around here, I think people probably came up with this just as a way to remember it. They said it came from apple snitch, but to me that seemed a big leap going from apple snitch to Albatwitch. It's possible, but probably not. It turns out that alb is a German verb that means to sort of escape, or in a sort of gliding motion, quickly escape. And I'm sorry, entwischen is the German verb to escape. Alb is the German for elf, so it seems it probably came from alb entwischen and just got anglicized or Americanized to Albatwitch. But these are small creatures. They're 4 foot tall, hair covered, bipedal. They're supposed to be quite aggressive. A lot of Native Americans, if you can get them to talk about it, they'll tell you if you see these things, run, go the other direction. They say if you see a Bigfoot, be careful. But these things, they'll tell you just either just be prepared to get out of there, because they're pretty aggressive. They're mischievous. They were known for stealing things, particularly apples. They apparently really like apples, and a lot of reports of them stealing apples from people picnicking along the Susquehanna River, and even throwing the apples back at them. They were said to have been hunted to extinction in the 1800s, but I have sightings, witnesses saying they've seen them on up to the 2000s.
Yeah. And this is around the Chickies Rock area, is that correct?
Chickies Rock has been kind of known as the sort of home of the Albatwitch. I think it probably, the original reports, people were seeing them a lot there because it was a place people went to picnic in the 1800s, and well, still today, but at that time it was a little more of a wilderness type area. Now I can't imagine that park it's a nice park, but it's very populated. It's very it's thin. It's maybe an acre wide, and it goes for a couple miles, but it's just not very deep woods there. But I think just over time they got sort of Chickies Rock got associated with these creatures, so that's sort of known as their home. But they've been seen on both sides of the river, Susquehanna River, York County side and the Lancaster side. Mostly along the river there, where Chickies Rock lays along the river as well.
And you have a really weird encounter, I think it was from the 1800s at Chickies Rock, don't you? The thing with the knives in its head? Oh,
that was, that was from the mid-1900s. A woman, she was picnicking there with her friends, and they went to leave and get some water, and she saw this, I think she said it was like 11 or 12 feet high, mummified creature with looked like knives sticking out of the side of its head. Completely terrified her, and they actually, there was a fellow driving, she said he had to pull over. He was so shocked by what he saw, and then they realized that they had left most of their workmates back there in the park, so they had to run back, and they got him. It was unclear from the original newspaper article if her workmates saw it as well, other than the fellow that was driving with her, but they did say that the next day at work that everyone was very quiet. No one wanted to talk about it, except one woman said there was a witch who lived there that had cursed the area. But that was years later, and I think that was about the 1940s or 50s. In the late 1960s, there was sort of a ghost mania that was going on there. Some teenagers said they saw a ghost at Chickies Rock, and people would kind of drive up there. It became quite a thing for about a month's time. People were just going there every night. There'd have to be, police were there to direct traffic and so forth. People were just crowding in the park to look for a ghost. Those teenagers eventually came out and said, well, we made the story up. But that said, somebody did report seeing a bunch of people saw what they described as a kind of a silver mist. But one person said what they saw was a thing with bandages wrapped around its head and knives sticking out of it. So it sort of confirmed that woman's sighting from years and years before.
And that has to be one of the strangest cryptids I've heard of.
Yeah, that's an odd one. I came across and I'm not sure how historically accurate it is, but someone was talking about Aztecs having done excursions to the north or something, and these were sort of ghosts of Aztec mummies. But I'm not sure how. I find it, that's kind of tenuous.
Yeah. Plus, Aztecs weren't 8 or 9 feet tall.
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean it's things like that where you can't. It's obviously not a flesh and blood creature in the traditional sense when you see something like that, and when you're seeing it in the same area as Bigfoot and these Albatwitches and stuff, it kind of leads to the idea that you're seeing something that is that changes. Yes,
yeah, I would agree. Either that, or there's however these things come through, whether they're shifting from some other dimension or whatever. The veil's thin. I don't know how the mechanisms work. If I did, I'd have 100 more books to write. But something tells me that there must be a reason why all these things are seen in the same area. If it's not like you said, if it's not one thing that people see either different ways or is changing its shape, then somehow these things are attracted to or they're coming through in the same areas.
Okay. Before we get into any of these other pieces, why don't you tell people where they can get this book?
Sure. Amazon's going to be the easiest way. They can come straight to me. My website is darkhollowarts.com, but honestly, Amazon's going to be probably easier for most people, and if they have Prime, they're not going to pay for postage.
And what can you spell your website for people?
Yeah, it's Dark Holler Arts. It's DarkHollerArts.com, and that's a record label, and some of my artwork is there, and the various things are there. So now the book's up on the front page.
Okay, and this is your first book.
Yes.
And you self-published it.
Yeah, I did the Create Space print on demand.
The artwork in the book is all yours.
Yes, the photographs are my bandmate, and I took quite a few of the photos. He took the better photos, I'll say, are his. He's a much better photographer than I. But all the illustrations are mine.
And they are some really fantastic illustrations. They add tremendously to the book.
Oh, thank you.
I was just really impressed. I wasn't really thinking about whether or not you had done them when I was initially reading. Then I'm thinking, wait, who's doing this artwork? This artwork's fantastic.
Oh, thanks.
It's on top of the fact that the book is actually a very good book, the artwork just makes it all that more valuable.
Oh, I'm glad. I'm glad people seem to like it. I'm very glad about that. When I was going into it, I said, well, I was an illustrator before I ever wrote Word One. So I thought, well, I have to illustrate this, and I was hoping that it wouldn't take away from the text. Because obviously they're my interpretations of these things.
Yeah.
But people seem to like it, so that's good.
And they do sort of help give you a visual of what you're talking about.
Yeah.
I mean, as best as we can from the descriptions, anyway.
Right. Yeah.
So you found quite a lot of Bigfoot sightings in this area.
that was the most shocking thing to me. And that's honestly, I've been interested in this stuff my whole life, but it was the number of Bigfoot sightings that kind of made me sort of jump in feet first and get very serious about paranormal research. Not just in this area, but I live here, so it's, of course, primarily it's going to be this area. But I was shocked. I think there's 100 or so sightings in the book. I'm trying to remember, but far more than I ever thought I'd find. I had heard about a few before I ever started writing, and I figured I'd find a couple here and there. Obviously, looking at the BFRO website and so forth, I saw a couple more. But when I really started digging and asking around, I found so many that I was just shocked. And I thought, well, this isn't the Pacific Northwest. This isn't a super remote area. We have plenty of farms and woods here. But I thought, how is this possible? That said, a lot of older researchers have told me that they've known this for years. That if it's a flesh and blood creature, they believe it has no problem staying close to humans. That that farms are easy food sources, and as long as they have sort of ways in and out, and probably along the waterways. If you look at maps, that would be the way in and out. Again, if it's a flesh and blood creature, I don't know exactly. I waver on that from day to day.
Yeah, as do I. I mean, there's some cases, some accounts you look at it and you go, well, it looks and behaves exactly like a flesh and blood creature. But then you have a number of cases in here that just have this paranormal element, tracks that go on and then just suddenly stop in the middle of a field. How do you explain that as a flesh and blood creature? Does it suddenly sprout wings and fly?
Right, and some people say, well, it's aware of its own tracks and it backtracks to its tracks. So why did it leave the tracks in the first place?
Yeah.
If it's that aware, it's an odd thing. Yeah, I have two cases of tracks just stopping in the middle of a field, which is odd. Very odd. Tracks with three toes come up a lot, not just in my book, but throughout Pennsylvania. Stan Gordon found a lot of three-toed tracks on the other side of the state. And here as well, and a lot of people are, well, that's not right. If it's not five toes, it's not a primate. But that's what the tracks show. It's just very, very strange stuff. But they are leaving tracks. They're leaving tracks. They're leaving hair behind. It's really a mystery.
What do you think the strangest Bigfoot case in the book is?
Oh, I have to. Well, the most exciting is the attack that was right on Toad Road, I think. And I've since talked to that witness, and it was the newspaper said it was a green-haired monster, and they said the police never found any evidence. I've talked to the witness since then. This happened in 1972, I believe, 1973. And he's still disturbed by the incident. He's told me he still has nightmares about it. He doesn't remember. He's very upset. He didn't. He said he'd have to even. I wanted to get him to come on tape and talk about his encounter. He said he really had to consider it. But he said I can't tell you what it looked like. And I said, well, you can't tell me, or you don't want to tell me what it looked like. And he said, no, I can't. And he said he didn't remember, but then he started giving me details. So I think what it was is he's resistant to dig in too much. It very affected him very much. He's real trauma from this. But he doesn't remember saying it was a green-haired monster. I half wonder if the police didn't put that detail in the paper just to sort of dismiss the story, make it seem a little more ridiculous than it was. But he said it was standing on two legs, it was hairy, it was bigger than any man, and it really beat him up. In the paper it said he was sent to the hospital with scratches on his face, but he had a serious head injury where he was hurt badly, and he had some memory loss because of it.
Huh. And there's not a lot of things that could do that. I mean, short of maybe a bear, but it seems like a bear would have done even more damage.
Yeah, and he said that he didn't think it was a bear. The police tried to convince him that it was a man wearing fur that scared him, and he said it absolutely. If it was a man wearing fur, he said this is the biggest man that's ever lived on the planet. He said it was absolutely massive.
It was Andre the Giant in a Bigfoot costume.
Yeah. So, and he grew up on a farm. He knows what animals look like. He said it most certainly was not. That's the other thing. The police shifted and said, well, it was a cow. They tried to convince him it was a cow. Then he said this was no cow. He said, I grew up on a farm. I know what cows look like. But
what are do you off the top of your head? Do you know some of the cases you've found since you've written the book?
Yeah, I've found other historical cases of like 2 or 3 historical, what they called wild men. They didn't have Bigfoot, obviously. The name didn't really become common currency until the 1960s or so.
Mm-hmm.
So if you look in old papers, you want to look for wild men. And I found a few cases of historical wild men right in the Toad Road area, which I didn't have in the book. I'm kind of kicking myself for. So it's another sort of check mark in that. Let's see, I was contacted by a woman, nothing outrageous, just saw a Bigfoot creature. A lot of times I'll get contacted by witnesses, and they don't want to be interviewed. They don't want to talk. They just want to know if it's real. I think they want to know that they're not crazy.
Yeah.
They want to be comforted, and she really didn't want to give me. She told me where it was. She told me she smelled the sort of garbagey skunk smell that people report, and she was on her back porch, and she saw eye shine and sort of a silhouette, and really kind of just wanted to know. She's just like, are they real? Did I really see something? And I said, well, I mean, just to sort of comfort her, I said, yeah, they're real. As far as people see them, you're not the only one. But so I got another report of a guy was camping and saw one. I get reports here and there fairly often, but a lot of them aren't really outrageous. They're just sort of either a roadside sighting or like I said, some guy saw one, like he heard it, thought there was another person. He was camping on an island in the middle of the Susquehanna River. Thought there was another person on the island, so they went looking and just saw this thing kind of running away.
And the thing is, when people say things like that, like they want to make sure they're not crazy. I mean, first of all, that implies they're clearly not making it up.
Right.
I think if you're making it up, you're not going to be going, am I crazy? You're gonna be trying to sell your story. But also, I mean, no matter what they are, people are genuinely seeing these things.
Exactly. Yeah.
Some of them are surely going to be misidentifications. Some people might be crazy, but I think that's the low percentile of it. I think there are enough level-minded people out there who have had these experiences who would know what they're looking at if it was a bear or something else normal. And they go back so far into history that I think it's intellectually dishonest to just dismiss these experiences as flights of imagination or misidentifications. There's just too many.
Yeah, exactly. And too many with the same details again and again.
Yeah.
I mean, these same behaviors, the same sort of details reported. And I think most adult humans, and a lot of times people say, oh, these city people, they'll see a raccoon and they'll think it's a Bigfoot, and I maybe sometimes, but I seriously, most people know the difference between a bear. They can tell the difference between a bear that's walking on 2 legs and something else that's walking on 2 legs. In general, bear rarely get up and walk on 2 legs.
Right.
But especially when you come down to experienced hunters, when they're reporting, it wasn't a bear. These guys, they spend their lives in the woods. They know what bear look like.
Yeah. Now, you also collected a bunch of Dogman sightings, and one of the things that's interesting is, although sometimes they get kind of grouped together, Bigfoot and Dogman sightings, you've kind of pointed out there are some very distinct differences between the Dogman and Bigfoot sightings.
Yeah, I mean, to me, the Dogman sightings almost, without a doubt, have to be more of a supernatural at least more of a supernatural element to it. Besides the fact that science kind of says like a dog-headed bipedal thing just can't exist. People report like a sense of fear always when they see these things. They get an intensely kind of evil vibe from it, and it's almost as if they desire to kind of instill fear in people. Like that's part of what they're there for. Very odd, very scary. People were, a lot of times Bigfoot. It depends on the nature of the encounter. Some people are amazed. People are often frightened, but not. A lot of times it's I saw it. It was scary, but they're not terrified. When they report these Dogman sightings, they report just being absolutely terrorized by the creatures without them, necessarily even doing anything other than just being there.
Yeah, yeah, and I know there are Dogman sightings out there where they're wearing clothes and things like that. I believe in. Is it the Skinwalker Ranch book? They talk about a Dogman encounter where they were like outside of a car in suits, smoking cigarettes or something like that, which is just even more bizarre to the whole bulk of the sighting.
Yeah, they're so strange, and I think I talk about that a little bit in the book as well. Just sort of passing in reference to, because I have one of the witnesses. She was telling, there's a lady who she's kind of a local historian who contacted me. Very nice woman, no internet whatsoever. She found out through one channel or another that I was doing this research, and she called me and we talked for hours. Very, very, very nice woman. She kind of keeps records of local history, but she has a special interest in strange things. And she told me the story about her neighbor, and she said her neighbor kept telling her, there's this dog, this sort of dog, this black dog that shows up at the foot of my bed, and it's thinking she's having these night visitations of either bad dreams or something ghostly. And again and again, she's telling her the story. When she said they were watching some sort of Egyptian type movie or documentary or something, and there was an Anubis character in there, and the woman said, "That's what's at the foot of my bed. That's it. That thing." She said, "You mean this thing's standing up and has arms and legs?" She said, "Yeah." And she said, "Well, you said it was a dog." But so she has this, this Anubis creature that she's reported that's at the foot of her bed, which must be incredibly terrifying, and I found it just very strange.
And it makes you wonder, did the Egyptians have these experiences, and that's where the Anubis image came from?
Right. Yeah. I mean, they have multiple entities with different animal heads and chimeras and stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I would think some of that is probably psychedelics, but or shamanic journeys. But who knows? Maybe they had experiences with dogmen.
Right. Yeah.
And Anubis is god of the dead, so that implies there would probably be some sense of fear associated with him.
Sure.
One of the other ones you talk about here is the Goatman, and you kind of connect that to the Jersey Devil and stuff like that.
Yeah, it's just such an odd thing to some of these creatures are just so strange. That Dogman is okay. Here's this werewolf type thing, and then Goatman. It's so odd. And in fact, the report I collected it's in a lot of other books, but they're usually reported as a Bigfoot sighting, and I think that's just researchers just not being able to wrap their head around this as anything else. They're assuming it was misreported, but it was. Reported over the course of 3 days in 1974 in Lancaster County, and it was seen by the Amish. So here we have this culture that's they're not super informed by pop culture in any
right.
way, and they're not looking to get rich on these sightings. So the first night, these fellows were coming out of the field, and they reported seeing this thing, and it was a big, hairy thing. So right there, you think, oh, it's Bigfoot. But they specifically said that it had horns like a goat, fangs like a tiger, and claws like a grizzly bear. That's the way they described it. Now, they didn't mention the feet. No one, I don't know if these, a lot of the Goatman sightings, people say they're hooved. There's no mention of the feet in any of the 3 sightings of this. But that, they almost got thrown from their horses. The following day, a fellow was in a field clearing weeds with a scythe, and this thing came through the brush. He tried to defend himself with the scythe. It ripped it out of his hands, and he kind of tore off, made a run for it at that point. He came back the following day and found the remnants of the scythe, but only the metal parts, so that just the blade and the bolts from the handle. And they assumed that the creature ate the wood out of the scythe. And on the 3rd day, a woman was in her garden, and she heard a kind of ruckus around her chicken coop. She looked up and saw the creature, and this must be an incredibly brave woman. She gave chase, and this thing grabbed 2 geese and made off with them, and she's chasing it, and it turned around and threw one at her. It hit her square in the chest, knocked her down, and it made off with the other goose. But all of them reported it having horns like a goat, and so to me it's certainly not the usual Bigfoot.
Yeah, and the one with them throwing the goose at her just kills me.
Oh yeah, to me the amazing when she gave chase.
Yeah,
that is a brave woman.
Huh. One of the things that you talk about is environmental factors in here. There are a bunch of iron furnaces, which I assume. How exactly did the iron furnaces work?
Well, these were like old iron forges that were. They build towers, and they would put. I think it's layers of charcoal and wood and so forth to heat them up, and they put the iron ore in there. And they'd melt the iron out basically. So they needed these big sort of stone towers to build up the heat of the furnace, and they keep them burning for months at a time. So what I found, we have several of them that were around here. Cador's furnace is right at the end of Toad Road. In fact, I believe Toad Road probably was built to lead to Cador's furnace originally. Now that was Revolutionary War era. And they made cannons and cannonball and grape shot for the Continental Army.
Go on.
In all these places, in Chickies Rock, there were 7 of these old iron forges, and everywhere, at least in Pennsylvania, and I'm sure probably elsewhere, if I had to guess, but I can almost guarantee you, wherever you find an old iron furnace in Pennsylvania, you'll find at least a ghost story. And you're probably going to find a lot of other weird stuff, the mystery lights and cryptid reports as well. That's what I found. And Chickies Rock is one of the strangest places. They like to claim it's the most haunted place in in Pennsylvania. But I think Gettysburg wants to probably have some words about that. But regardless, there's a lot of strange stuff in Chickies Rock area, and there were 7 iron furnaces located within that park.
Are there any iron furnaces down by Gettysburg?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
I'm sure they had quite a few around there. I found more of those than I thought I would as well in the area. I got curious, like why is this? Why are these iron? What does this iron furnaces have to do with it? And I don't know if it was because they were producing iron. I know where you get iron, you also get quartz, and a lot of researchers say that quartz has something to do with it. They also needed running water for these furnaces nearby. They're always built by creeks or the river.
Yeah.
So, and again, you always find, often you will find these reports of the near running water at Wandsworth.
Yeah. And that's one of the things that keeps standing out to me is that you have the places that have the most incidents of weird things going on. A lot of times have running water near them, have quartz or what's the other one? There's another type of rock that is totally escaping me at the moment. But you have certain environmental factors that repeat over and over in these certain areas.
Yeah. In fact, I was briefly talking to a fellow who's done a bunch of research at Skinwalker Ranch. He's written a few books. I'm drawing a blank on his name. Ryan is his first name. And the first question I asked him was, is there quartz there? And he said, well, I don't know if he knew about the quartz, but I said, what about running water? Is there a creek that goes through that property? He said, oh, yeah, and he told me the name of the creek. Yeah, I'm not surprised at all.
Granite. I think granite is the other common one. And granite actually can, with running water, I believe, can conduct some level of electricity. Right,
yeah. Yeah, and that's the ghost hunters are kind of more on the cutting edge of this environmental stuff, I think.
Yeah.
And I talked to one fellow, and he had all sorts of tools and so forth, and he told me, you definitely want to look at the quartz, and there is you can sort of follow, if you look at the geological maps, you can sort of follow this kind of vein of quartz that almost works. It's not straight like a ley line, but it's like a ley line that connects all these areas that I write about in the book.
And you also find fault lines a lot of times. Some of the stuff moves along fault lines.
Right. Yeah.
So, I mean, I think, and that's not to dismiss the reality of these things, but this may be a key to why these things happen at certain areas. There may be some kind of, some kind of electrical phenomena that either stimulates our brains in some way or opens doorways to something, or vibration. Maybe these things exist at a higher vibration than we do, or a lower vibration that we can normally pick up. But in these areas, their vibration is changed, or our vibration is changed.
Right, and a lot of people, psychics and so forth I talk to will talk about vortexes in regards to these places. And it could be the same kind of thing, like if there are places where this energy is concentrated one way or another, maybe they allow these things to slip through.
Yeah. I don't know. It's a good book.
Well, thank you very much.
I enjoyed reading this quite a bit. And there's a bunch more stuff in here. We've covered, a fraction of it. It's not an exceptionally long book, but you do have a lot of stuff in here. And as
I try to be thorough. I started to become kind of obsessive to the point where, like I said, I found some stuff afterwards, and I'm kind of kicking myself. I missed that.
Is there anything else you want to add that you found afterwards, that in particular?
Like I said, there's nothing that's sort of groundbreaking other than the witness report that I described when I was able to actually contact the fellow who was attacked out there. I've had some other people tell me just some other revelations about the Toad Road area. Nothing that's doing anything really but confirming my thoughts. People were talking about having their car parked out there and having something large lift the rear end of their car, which they couldn't see. And again, they thought ghosts, but they were parked pretty much right where that fellow got attacked. And some folks who went out there who were teenagers in the 1970s have been telling me that there's a different gate that was further, that wasn't actually on Toad Road, that was the area of interest for them. So I got a really interesting report about some people who went behind this gate, and there was a house there, an old stone house, and they said there was pears and apple trees there. They picked the pears, and they said he took them home to his mom. He said, they're the most delicious pears I ever had in my life. So he said, I went back a week later, and the pear trees were gone, the house was gone, the gate was still there. But that was very interesting, and to me that was again nothing to do with 7 gates. It was one particular gate that was in front of this house. That was apparently that's where all the teenagers went to have spooky experiences in the 70s.
Huh. All right. Well, the book is Beyond the Seventh Gate, Exploring Toad Road, the Seven Gates of Hell, and Other Strangeness in York, Lancaster, and Adams counties. And that, if anyone missed it, is in southern central Pennsylvania. And you are Timothy Renner, and people can find you online where?
you can either go to Dark Hollow Arts. If anyone either from this area or outside this area wants to talk about any experiences they've had, I'd love to hear it. My email is timemotheye, just TIMEMOTHEYE @gmail.com. And obviously, if you want to get a book signed or something from me, you can contact me there as well.
Okay. And you're also in a band.
Yes, sir.
And what is the band?
The band's called Stone Breath. We've been around for over 20 years now, which is crazy. It's folk music. It's kind of on the darker side. We talk about this kind of spooky stuff. We do traditional music and originals. And we just recorded an album called Cryptids, which is all about cryptid creatures and local legends.